Hello, everybody. I'm Denis. I'm from Model Finance. I'm going to be a moderator. I'm covering the area of marketing. I'm going to introduce some other panelists here. This is Maya from Yearn. She's on the regulatory side. Next one is Facu. He is a contributor from Yearn Finance. And we have our star, Captain Nemo, contributor from LobsterDAO and a couple of other DAOs. So we're going to talk about DAOs, and don't be surprised if we kind of stray off the path, and we're just going to start off with a simple question and see where it takes us from there. So what would you say would be the pros and cons of being a decentralized organization? And to kind of keep it more focused, we can go through certain aspects, and we can start probably with the security aspect. So smart contract exploits, and how would you go about it?
Okay, it's me. Okay. Well, at Yearn Finance, we have a multi-sig. So I would like to talk about the pros of having a decentralized organization and decision-making. That you can secure the funds because there's no central point of failure. So for smart contract risk, you actually mitigate a lot of stuff because even the multi-sig cannot access the funds. So not having a central point of failure, I think it's the bigger pro, the bigger pro in having a decentralized organization. There are some cons about the decentralized organization, but I will focus on the cons, on the pros.
All right. So with respect to some of the cons with that is that basically security aspect, it's difficult to track. When it's centralized, it's easier to mitigate a risk, whereas when it's decentralized, it's harder to track where the risk is coming from and how to mitigate the security breach. So those are some of the things that, you know, what we see like in the space overall, people are not thinking about it thoroughly when they're planning how to structure a DAO. And that's something that should be kept in mind because it is an issue that will come up later on, and it could subject you to probably getting in trouble with regulators or users, etc. So it's definitely an important aspect to keep in mind.
Okay, since you mentioned the regulatory side, how would you define that aspect of the pros and cons of DAO?
Well, okay, I'll take a step back a little bit, and I'll talk in general a little about how to approach. I know a lot of people in the space right now are super interested in having a DAO, right? It's a hype word. It's like the cool thing to do. So what are some of the things that you should think about when you're structuring one from a legal perspective? Because I think that's sometimes like the last thing people are thinking about. I would start first with what's the purpose of the DAO? Is it for profit? Is it non-profit? And that kind of draws you into how do you want to structure it from geolocation-wise, and what jurisdiction do you want to choose? There are certain jurisdictions that are better for nonprofits. For example, like Cayman Islands, Switzerland. There are jurisdictions that are better for profit. My bad. And those are like Panama and what's the other one? Bahamas is good for that as well. And we also have new jurisdictions that are coming up in the US, like Wyoming, there's Vermont. Also, Germany recognizes the Wyoming law. So there are different things to think about, and that's actually a really important aspect because if you were to get into some sort of legal trouble, that is gonna be where you're likely to be sued. And then you guys could talk about decentralization with that respect. Another layer after thinking about like, okay, this is what my purpose is, this is the jurisdiction aspect. Also, you want to think about the governance. I think that's something that's not fully played out yet and fully thought through, and sometimes you want to make sure that your bylaws are reflecting how you want to actually administer the votes. You want to make sure you avoid gamification and a few other things, but I'll pass it on to you guys to talk a little bit about the cons of what I just mentioned.
It seems to be us against Maya, right?
No, like, so the challenge, in my opinion, about the regulation in general is I'm not against it, but what is kind of like potentially scary, in my opinion, is if you introduce too many things around the regulation for the innovators that want to test out. And have in mind, it's kind of like, in my opinion, a Pandora box, in a sense that, sure, some of the code that is deployed on a blockchain is maybe not the best code, is possibly like a scammer code or something like that, and you definitely want to help people to actually be educated and safe and whatnot. But then on the other side, if you're putting like a lot of emphasis on the regulation of all of these bits and pieces, you can have the challenge of engineers and innovators being scared to actually deploy the things and thinking 15 times before doing something. And I think that from that perspective can also slow down the whole innovation. And I'm on that side where I believe that if you look at the last 2-3 years on the DeFi space, the amount of evolution, innovation, and all the things that were going on is equivalent to whatever we've seen in the last like 20 years of IT in the financial sector. Like, it's just so fast, so vibrant, and I really, really wouldn't believe that that would be possible if we didn't have all of the craziness, if we didn't have the hype, if we didn't have the people that got wrecked, how we like to say, or that lost some money. Of course, it's super bad. Of course, it's like really something that I really hate and don't want to see happening. But then, in the same time, I do believe that by teaching people to be a bit more educated and not like going to the betting system and trying to bet, will this token go up and down, is something that we want to emphasize more in order to kind of like grow this ecosystem. So last point on that is like on the regulation side, I do think that we need to have some type of the regulation, but then I wouldn't touch like a lot of innovation and engineering aspects and just let people be and try and iterate and test, and then in one potentially moment to just have some regulatory aspect there. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. First of all, yeah, regulations seem to slow down innovation, but, so it doesn't seem that we are against Maya. I've seen sandboxes in Europe, especially, where you can experiment being like on the side of the law. But those are official sandboxes made by the government, so that's cool. The other hand of what Maya said about jurisdiction and everything is a fully decentralized network of contributors. That's what we do. We don't have an office. We don't have a jurisdiction. We are not incorporated. So that's the path we took. I don't think that one path is better than the other one. I think that it depends on what you want to achieve and how, and decentralization is not for everyone, and regulation is not for everyone. Because when I say that regulation might seem to slow down innovation, on the other hand, decentralization also slows down sometimes innovation if you don't have a lot of organization around it. So I think it's a balance sometimes.
Okay.
Can I add more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. All right, so to that comment, so I know we should be standing up. But basically, like, a couple things come to mind when you're saying that. Like, yes, you said you're unincorporated, right? You're all over. You just have contributors, and they vote, etc. Is your contract like modifiable? Are those things in place? Like, do you have bylaws? Like, those are things that are really important that I think a lot of people, when they think decentralization, they're like, oh, well, we're not going to have any infrastructure in place. And then the other aspect, it's like, well, what if I want to sue you? Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in some ways, so here's the issue that comes up when you're super decentralized in this way, and some of the things that are being talked about, like on the regulatory side. And trust me, I understand both sides, like, it's tough, it's a tough battle. But on the regulatory side, some of the things that are coming up is that, okay, well, I can't find like their incorporation address. I can't find where they're operating out of because they're all over the place. So then the other option is, usually when you're suing someone, those are the two things that you look at, right? Well, the other option is like, where are they being sued? So like, let's say I'm suing you and I'm suing you here. all of a sudden, you might have multiple individuals, not just me, suing you in different jurisdictions, and those courts might decide, because we can't locate you, you actually have to come to that venue. So there's also like a cost and risk associated. Obviously, not a lot of people have money to sue, so it's tough. But those are some of the things that are being discussed like on that level. And I think that's some of the cons with being also super decentralized, is like down the line, like where are you going to be subject to jurisdiction? And then with regards to taxes, like how is that going to play out? You know, especially as you build more products, that is always interesting. And then another thing I wanted to mention is now financial products are being highly scrutinized in the crypto space, right? It's lending platforms. Like, especially like when you hear the word yield, it's like such a buzzword, especially around this time. And then there's stable coins. There's so many regulators looking into these things. So just even if you're offering that product, even though you're decentralized, there might still be some digging. And if there is something that goes wrong on your platform, you might be subject to like investigation. So those are other things to like keep in mind too. And where you're offering your product, like not only where you're incorporated, but you're not incorporated, so solves that.
All right, so to take a small step back from the regulatory side, let's talk about a bit different aspect of DAOs. So the coordination, the leadership, how to align the incentives of the actual contributors in the DAO in terms of basically their incentives. How do you motivate them to actually work enough? How to be like on a personal, individual level, how to actually motivate the person. And especially since, sure, if you have it very decentralized, usually not a lot of work is getting done. But you also cannot centralize it too much because you're kind of moving away from the whole point of having blockchain. So some DAOs, like we have sub-DAOs in which contributors are elected by the community. But how would you do it? How did you experience that in your DAOs, or like from your experience?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question because, as I said before, one of the cons of being a DAO, sometimes it can become slow because everyone has a voice and everyone's voice has the same weight. We are more than 40 people now at Yearn, so that needs some serious process. But everyone needs to agree about it. So what we found that works the best for us is having small teams. Because we're talking about this. If not, you have the bystander effect. If there's a lot of people working on something, everyone thinks that someone else is going to do it, so nobody does it. When you have small teams, everyone is accountable. So you have more impact and you can move faster. But we're only 40 people and 100 and something open source contributors. But LobsterDAO?
Yeah. So what I started doing even before LobsterDAO for some of the DAOs that I was trying to contribute to or contributing was I think that DAOs should operate in some way of seasons, let's call it like that. Because like as Facu mentioned, like for the LobsterDAO, we randomly made the NFT collection for fun and airdrop to all of the people in our community that were contributing to the discussions. And out of nowhere, other projects wanted to collaborate with us. Therefore, somehow organically, we became the DAO that is trying to shape some voting system, trying to make some rewarding system for the contributors and whatnot. And I believe that like a lot of people at the beginning, especially at the beginning, everybody have like their 2 cents to say. Like everybody are smart when they just need to say something, but without like actually doing the work, right? And what I realized is like, why not operating in season 0, season 1, season 2? And just like, for example, we now in LobsterDAO, we kind of like said, okay, we're now in season 1, meaning we realized that we want to do the partnerships. We realized that we want to contribute to the research and grants programs. We don't have the idea where we want to go from here. So in the next 3 months, we want to see, can we build that job board in a meaningful way that contributes to the whole space? Can we make like a better research? Can we do all of these things? And then after like these 3 months, we'll go into next season, discuss what was good, what was bad. So in my opinion is like one of the important aspects is the maturity of the DAO and how things are progressing. At the beginning, it can be super centralized, like maybe just like literally 5 people having the multi-sig and the deploying the code, but then how time is passing by and how you're shaping culture of your organization, as you would do in Web 2 or whatever, how you're shaping up your product, I think that then you have the opportunity to just make like a smaller multi-sigs, operate in the teams, give certain opportunities to the team to kind of like lead efforts, give people opportunity to lead the efforts for whatever time being and be rewarded for it. So that's kind of like what I believe.
Okay, that's cool. That's something that we're doing as well, to kind of have some sort of, let's say, leaders in the small working groups and what you call them seasons, or basically something like project-based. But once you achieve some kind of like critical, like big amount of people, how to go about like organizing them?
Go ahead, and then I'll ask that.
That's a good question. You don't. That's the interesting thing. We didn't know how to do it because there's not there's no playbook to do it. So we let it flow naturally, and it's interesting because some people do not want to lead. They just want to sit and do their stuff, code or whatever it is, design, art, whatever. And some other people like naturally rise as leaders. So you only have to have, you need to have processes to make decisions and to take action, and to like not to spend too much time bike sharing and discussing for the eternity. But like for the hierarchy, it's natural. That's, for me, that's the most interesting part about the DAOs and about being horizontal.
Okay, so in a way, you have people coming from inside the DAO who kind of emerge as perhaps something like leaders or somebody who kind of gets to some conclusions?
Yeah, just out of respect from other contributors. We are all the same. That's why I like to say I'm a contributor, and when they ask me what's your title, I actually have no title. It's like some people in some groups respect me more and I lead more, and in other groups they do not because I'm not an expert or I have no idea what they're talking about, and that's just fine. That's the whole idea around the DAO and being horizontal.
Just really small thing about that is what I like and what I'm seeing more and more with all of these organizations, DAOs, chats, whatever, like the mix of all of this chaos, is that basically people gain the respect by doing the work. So if you want to help out, for example, in Lobsters, if people want to help out on the partnership side, and you have a person that contributed to 4, 5, 6 different partnerships from start to finish, you gain a respect to that person, and kind of like it has a stronger weight than somebody else who was just like sitting on the side or just giving ideas or whatever. So I think that naturally what happens is like you have some leaders, still leadless organization, but thought leaders, let's call it like that, although that I don't like the word.
Okay, in terms of that, how would you actually go about quantifying the respect that some leader gains? There we could talk about also like the voting aspect, how that person gains some sort of credibility. Is it coming internally from the team or like from some sort of votes from the community?
I'm gonna go ahead. So back to your point, so with, I think some of the stuff that comes up is like the rewards that you mentioned. So you are incentivizing people to participate, but there are issues with that, right? So essentially, yeah, I would love to hear more about that aspect. And then with regards to people gaining like hierarchy, what's it like on that level? Because they're making decisions, right? When you gain hierarchy, you're making decisions. So then in a way, you're starting to also resemble like a traditional structure in your own way. Obviously, it's still completely different. But those are the 2 points that like come up in mind. And, you know, I think there could be some issues with that. Yeah.
Okay. I am on that boat that like I really believe
you
that
were waiting for that one at the minute.
Yeah. I'm operating the boat tomorrow. They just didn't have one person for the panel, so they called me. Anyway, so I'm really thinking that like I don't like the idea of like headless, meaning that people believe that there is just a bunch of people there, everybody doing whatever they want. It's like still so it's member-run organizations, right? And it doesn't mean that you don't have like a person that is on a higher grant or salary or whatever you want to call, that you don't have the team leaders, that you don't have the people that together we decided that that person should make the decision or whatnot. I still think that DAOs are beautiful in my opinion because there's so many different ways how you can actually organize. And when you look at, as you said, like organizations from the normal organizations and the DAOs, in my opinion, one of the things that DAO is bringing on is a couple of things from the technological aspect that can make these organizations more efficient. So I see DAOs as a natural evolution and revolution in a way how organizations are possibly run, how we reward contributors, in which way we reward these people, so on and so forth. So it doesn't necessarily mean, in my opinion, that it's headless. And I think that how people progress, as we mentioned in hierarchy, that these people naturally have more saying, or they're in that situation where we discussed and said, you're on this multi-sig, you're signing for this particular, whatever, from the treasury aspect to pay for the marketing stuff, or you're signing for deployment of the code, or you're in charge to say that we are secure enough that we can deploy this on the mainnet.
I have something to add. I think one point when you draw that picture that I really like from my side is actually the transparency aspect of a DAO. Yes. I think that's really cool if it's curated in the right way. And I think that is something that is just like a beautiful evolution away from the traditional corporate structure where you don't know what the thought process behind certain decisions, or, you know, Elon Musk like tweets all the time, like things like that. Like you don't know like where things are going. So it's cool that we get to see everything. I would just like to see more improvement on the governance and voting, and then like figuring out like a middle ground for how to incorporate or like have some sort of legal wrapper, you know, just to protect consumers.
No, as I said, like I'm not against the regulation. I just like want to kind of like have that line between what should be regulated and what should be left as for people to regulate themselves, right?
Yeah.
And in the end, I really believe that actually, even before a good wrapper regulation, I really believe that we as members of the community will push harder for these transparencies, because I believe that like a smart, interesting people from the different areas of expertise that are joining the blockchain space are pushing for that. Like I'll give you the example. I'm now contributing to one type of like a metaverse game project called Vasiverse. And one of the things, like the guys are now in the process of pre-minting phase, right? And people are asking really like tough questions about, okay, so your minting price is this and that, you're minting this many, you're trying to make this much money, how it is spent, how much will be in treasury, who will be running this show? So like people are already asking that. Why? Because we had like 1 year of my slippers as profile picture NFTs that people are buying and saying, oh, this is the best thing ever happened in my life and let me sell you for 100 ETH. Like, so because of these aspects, we have more and more smart people that got burned, wrecked, sleepless nights and whatnot, that are insisting for more transparency. And that's, in my opinion, beautiful.
All right, let's say you have transparency covered. What about the governance and voting? How would you go about handling one of the bigger problems in DAOs, which is basically voting apathy? So not enough, not a sufficient number of people actually participating in making the decisions, going through the proposals and the execution as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question also, because you have voting apathy because voters don't get or don't seem to get any upside from voting. What we try to do is to make people part of the organization, so they actually see the impact they are making with their voting. You know, so they not only see the financial incentive, like the economic incentive of the token going up because that was the right decision to make, but also as being part of the organization. I think that's the most important part. Like voters feeling part of the organization. We don't make any difference between people that receive a recurrent grant and other people that don't receive a recurrent grant, because we are like open to any contributions. But anyways, we want every single person to be part of the organization. I think that's That's one of the ways. You can incentivize by giving people money, but that's going to like achieve a different effect. Like people are going to vote whatever without thinking very much about it. So gotta be careful about it.
All right, cool. So focusing more like on the intrinsic value for each of the voters, each of the participants. My question for you, like moving forward on the regulatory side, I guess DAOs are not going to look like this in a year, and there are some like movements, right?
Yeah, I can elaborate. So pretty much you're on point with that. We are seeing a lot of things evolve in the space, especially at a speed level with DAOs. It's actually really cool. So it's funny, DAOs are truly into transparency and like being proactive because there's a few working groups right now coming out with their own model law on how basically regulators should approach DAOs, and also almost like, you know, DAO's own playbook on the legal side. And we have collaborators from the EU and collaborators from the US, and they're working on it. We're basically supposed to solidify it in September. And then the goal is to have these two groups go to their regulators and advocate for this to be implemented as like a DAO model law. If you guys are interested in learning more about it, I'm happy to share information. I could actually share the PDF itself, and if you have a DAO and you want to actually collaborate on ideas and be involved in the working groups, we would love to have more people that have a stake in it. I think it's always important to have like industry insight. We do have a few members on the US side, but it'd be great to expand it and try to implement it all over. With respect to other regulation, Mika did touch base briefly on DAOs. I don't know if it will actually go into the final iteration. So for those of you who don't know, Mika is mainly focused on the EU. And it's basically this digital asset framework that they decided to come out with to unify the EU. On the US side, obviously we have like Vermont and Wyoming coming out with their own laws, but we're still figuring it out on a higher level. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this next year. I think there's going to be a lot of development, but I do give kudos to the DAO space for being proactive, and instead of like sitting back and being like, you know what, we'll wait for the regulators to like figure out how to do this. So it's good to do it now before every country starts coming out with their own framework officially.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that it's a joint effort. It's much better than like letting the regulators do what they do alone, because they probably don't understand fully the ecosystem. But I also think it's about options. Maybe you can have a regulated world or semi-regulated or whatever, and an unregulated world when you know the risks. Like you gotta be 100% accountable for what you're doing. But yeah, I agree.
Okay, I believe we have time for one more question. I want to make it more actionable for perhaps people wanting to participate in DAOs. How does a person go about being employed in a DAO, whether on like project-based or like half-time contributor or even full-time contributor? How would you go about it?
Okay, well, yeah, at Yearn, we don't employ people. We actually have contributors. And our system is, we call it proof of work, like the mining system, because you need to do something and then you're going to get rewarded. No matter what, you're going to get rewarded. We don't like people working for free. But the first thing, it's doing something. Nobody's going to tell you what to do. Like, hey, no, you have to do this or paint that wall black. No. You go and do it if you think it's the best thing for the DAO, and you're going to get rewarded. And that's the first step towards becoming like a full-time member in the DAO.
So is there basically like a job listing, or not job listing, but more like a grants page or something like that?
What we do have, it's a page with all the GitHub issues and some bounties. But for example, if you see something that needs to be fixed, like you want to give a talk here at Blockspill, you just say, hey, I will give a talk in Blockspill. Can someone help me craft the presentation and choose a topic? Yeah, sure. And you go and do it, and you're a Yearn contributor. Nobody's going to say, hey, no, you're not from Yearn, all the way around.
So basically the first step is kind of participating in the governance, being on the forum or whatever, kind of like keeping track of all the information that's going on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To add basically like what Facu said is, what I see across the whole space is people starting to be in communities, either LobsterDAO or whatever communities, and start learning about products that are coming out, right? And when you like the product, all of these teams have either Discords or some type of like communication channel. You usually go there, and it's always, especially at the beginning, you're not even aware how many things you will need to work on. So the team is always swamped with things, right? And the team is always happy if somebody else comes there and says, hey guys, I can take care of this. Whatever that is, I can take care and be a community moderator for Croatian ecosystem. And I will like take care of that. And if you start contributing in that way, you are usually in the cases compensated, like whether with some stable coins or whether with the governance tokens of that own protocol. And then because it's permissionless market, you decide what you want to do with those tokens, like whether you want to sell them for the stable coins and then exit the liquidity totally from the ecosystem, or you want to hold them and like actually be part of the ecosystem, whatnot. But generally speaking, it's that, like it's more like proactive approach where everybody are more than welcome to proactively do anything.
That's a good example. Like that's how we had it in DAO as well, starting basically from people asking marketing when, and then somebody just kind of started contributing, started helping, and that's how like a marketing sub-DAO was formed as well.
It's funny that we talk about this topic because earlier we were just chatting and I was asking them, well, like, are you an independent contractor? Like how, like, you know, how are you employed? And it's just crazy to see the transition happen slowly towards like another world, basically.
All right, cool. I believe we're out of time. Thank you for attending. Yeah, yeah, we can go for the questions. Yeah. Does somebody have any questions from the audience?
No uncomfortable questions.
No questions, really. Yeah. Go ahead. First round.
I'll ask you the question you asked me to ask you. No, just kidding. What do you think about meritocracy as something that can be implemented in a DAO to also like further the? You said one of the cons is innovation and the speed. What do you think about like meritocracy as a way to speed it up?
Yeah, actually we use some kind of meritocracy. And at Yearn we went one step beyond that. We actually set ourselves our salaries or grants. So every quarter we decide as a group how much each of us is going to earn. But it's not like you say, hey, no, I want to earn 50% of the salary, of the whole revenue. No, it doesn't work like that. Yeah, you can do it, but everyone else is going to say, maybe not. And there's going to be a discussion around that, and that brings two things. First of all, the respect that people have for you and the tasks that you're doing, because you don't earn respect just out of being like a rock star. And also you're going to have all the hard conversations, because when you want to challenge someone else's grant or compensation, whatever, you really need to have some tough conversations. So yeah, we use some kind of meritocracy at Yearn, and I think it's a good thing. It's been good.
All right, somebody else with questions? Over there.
So, are you concerned about governance attacks at certain points, and how do you plan to tackle this when somebody manages to seize a lot of tokens and then maybe use that to drive the DAO to a certain direction?
Did you say governance attacks or governance tax?
Governance attacks.
Oh, okay. Not really, because we have a special case that is we have a limited supply, so, and it's a very small supply, so it's really not possible. Like we try to not let the lending markets have many tokens, so they cannot lend out a lot of tokens and do a governance attack. And also our multisig has a veto power, so they can say no to to a proposal. It's never happened yet. I hope it never happens because it's going to be like a big drama. But well, at least we have the power.
Just to add, like the cool part there, in my opinion, is that how we are continuing to play with the whole DAO concepts. I think that we'll find some type of mechanisms that we will slowly take and start using in majority of the DAOs, right? And depending also what it is. Is it investment DAO? Is it a protocol? Is it game? Like whatever that is, it will be different mechanisms in my opinion. And definitely we already seen that these type of things are happening from time to time when the mechanisms are not taught, the mechanisms are not think through, that these type of things are happening, right? And that's a learning curve. So I think that we have plenty of more things to learn right now, and definitely not the best way how we are sorting out all of these things. But one of the things in my opinion is this kind of like a veto power that is kind of like, hey, somebody tried malicious acts. As a community, we should definitely have the opportunity to stop it, and I think that that should be encouraged generally.
Can I ask a question? It's for Maya, because I would like to know more about the stuff I don't know. So, do you see any governance attack? Because I think that Valentin's question was really valid. Governance attack in the regulated world? Or in a more regular conference?
Yeah. Like within the traditional space?
Yeah.
I'm sure if we look historically, there's a few that have occurred. And obviously, there's corruption as well. And, you know, I think the interesting thing about crypto and some of the reason it's spread and some of the reason why this technology is spreading so much is because there's a lot of jurisdictions that don't trust their government, whether it's a governance attack or like in whatever form it is. Like it could be corruption, it could be everything you could think of under the hood. But basically, I think that's where a lot of this technology is coming from. But I can't pinpoint one that comes to mind right now. But there's definitely some, yeah. And there's leaks and there's a lot of things happening over there.
Any more questions from the audience? Well, I believe that wraps it up. Thank you.
Chill. There's a question.
Okay, so regarding wrapped DAOs, we talked about it as a solution for a DAO to function in the actual traditional world, but in that case, the DAO itself is pushed in sort of a role of board of shareholders and doesn't actually act on its own behalf. It has a person appointed who is a director of a LLC or a board member who actually enforces the decisions of the DAO. So do you maybe see a solution that is alternative for that, for a DAO to function in the traditional markets without actually losing its purpose and its decentralization?
There are no C-level roles in a DAO in general. Some DAOs they do have more hierarchy, but at Yearn in particular, we don't have any C-level roles or anyone pushing the decisions.
No, my question was how do you imagine a future, which I believe we are all going forward, in which a DAO actively participates in traditional markets and in traditional role, but without losing its decentralization? How does it retain its separate personality as a specific entity?
So one interesting test that is happening more and more, for example, ENS, Ethereum Name Service, is doing that, and a couple of others, is you have people that are nominated to be the governors of the protocol. And basically, like usually how it works is they have a pitch. They literally pitch to the whole community, hey, whoever you are that is owning ENS tokens, this is me, this is my experience, these are my beliefs how ENS should be governed and which direction it should go. Please delegate me your voting power. So then people delegate the voting power. The beauty of this is that in any moment you can withdraw your voting power that you gave to that person and give to somebody else. So, and it happened, like ENS had some drama that I don't want even to discuss now, like some cancel culture things that, we in the Balkans not specifically like, that are more liked in the other hemisphere. And generally what started happening is like, I needed to say this, you know me, I couldn't, I just couldn't. Like, but what started happening is like there was like a big drama and people were withdrawing the power, giving power to other people based on the influences on these type of things. And I think that this is some mechanism. It's still kind of like, sure, making a bit against centralized, but I really think that the whole DAO system will be decentralized, centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized, decentralized. And I think if you look at the historical, even internet, like it was totally decentralized, then we had like Facebooks and Twitters and whatnot that are centralized power of social networks. Then we are now trying again to decentralize in the different systems. So who knows what the future holds from that aspect, right? So yeah, that's my opinion.
If you don't mind, just one more a bit philosophical question. From a standpoint of somebody who deals with business clients, what would be your suggestion for somebody who wants to do business to decentralize their business? Because I believe that decentralization comes naturally to people involved with the blockchain. But for somebody who doesn't, how would you suggest? What would be your suggestion for them to do their business or their project decentralized rather than centralized?
I think first, and we are working as a community more and more on that. For example, there is something called Token Engineering organization, so you can Google it. Basically, it's an organization that is trying to get as many as possible people from the different experiences, so mathematics, physics, philosophy, sociology, and whatnot, and trying to educate people. So in my opinion, we are now just starting out with all of this concept of the decentralization, even though that it's like a lot of years in somebody's thinking, in mine is really short span of time. We yet lack a good tools that we're building right now, that we're trying to build, good tools and good educational platforms and programs to educate people how you can decentralize the way how you operate. And I think that hopefully in the next 2-3 years, we'll have more resources, more educational programs, more courses, and then more toolings that anybody can use without the coding experience, and just like with 3 clicks do that. So I think that that's the next step, right? Educating people how to let go the power from the centralized source to the other people, even in a team, like even in a team. Doesn't matter if they're still centralized organization, there is a way to do this in a team and the way how you operate between each other. So yeah, that's it.
Right, I really believe we are out of time now, so attempt to wrap it up number 3. Let's hear it for the panelists. Thank you.